Feeling comfortable in your own skin. Wow, what a topic. I think that's actually probably one of the big reasons why I set out on the non-dual or spiritual path in the first place, was just to feel like okay as myself. And this is congruent with a lot of the people that I work with, actually having had very deep conversations with many people in extraordinary ways. A lot of us on the spiritual path are just seeking to be ourselves, to be like fully authentic. What does that even mean? And how can we get there? And why do we feel so inauthentic? All those things are really important to understand. So in this video, I'm going to go into a lot of depth as to what's really obscuring feeling comfortable in our own skin. Why can't we be authentic? What's going on here? And give you some ideas and frameworks and understandings to provide a lot of context around what's happening here. Okay, so first things first, why is this happening, right? Because maybe you've had a spiritual practice for some time. Maybe a lot of the clients I work with have been at this for years, right? Resting is awareness. With Ramana Maharishi practicing, people under like Angelo Dilullo, Adyashanti, these sorts of pointers, or Rupert Spira, Muji, right? Rest is awareness. We funnel that teaching, seems to come back to that generally. It's a very powerful teaching. So we might be practicing that for years and even taking it out into daily life, but it still feels so painful. Like life triggers us a lot. And we can rest as awareness. We have an ineffable, either a glimpse or an ongoing knowingness of awareness. And, but it still feels so uncomfortable. And this is how it was for me. I was practicing self-inquiry for some time, and, it still bewildered me that I had this sort of recognition of awareness, but it was this sort of detached, disembodied, emotionally turbulent state of being where there was a knowingness of that presence, and yet there was still a sense of being unsettled through the accumulation of all sorts of spiritual concepts, like subtle spiritual concepts that felt painful in the body. Like, for example, coming to treat thought as sort of an enemy when doing self-inquiry. Like, oh, there's another thought. Okay, de-identify from that thought and get back to presence. And it had this sort of energy of like restlessness to it. Or having a doubt, like I can't wake up in this lifetime, right? So these things started to stack and stack and stack with years of spiritual practice. And there was that feeling of restlessness. And I had this feeling of being almost like a caricature of myself, like I was aware of awareness, but this disembodied sort of dysregulated state felt like I wasn't comfortable. Like I just wasn't comfortable. I wasn't authentic with other people in relationship. I wasn't authentic with myself. And it was weird because I was in this state of knowing that was happening. Like I could tell that was happening, which creates even more suffering because there's the awareness and then there's the sense of hopelessness that like, how do I get rid of this? Like I'm doing the sentinel thing that's going to uproot all suffering according to teachers, right? Like I'm going to rest as awareness and transcend it all. So yeah, if you're in that boat, if you're resonating, I've got good news for you, because there is through my trial by fire, I had to learn a lot of the things that disentangled that feeling of being deeply uncomfortable in my own skin. Okay, so what's happening here? Well, put simply, as you're resting as awareness, as you're doing the non-dual practice, who am I? Deepening in the mystery, feeling the ineffable sense of presence. What that's doing is it's surfacing all of the repressed emotions and coping strategies. It seems like it's very mysterious, right? But the more you rest in your fundamental nature of being, everything that isn't serving your most authentic expression, just like you were when you were a baby, not holding back, just letting out, letting things flow, being in spontaneity and flow, all of that stuff, all the coping strategies begin to become really illuminated in the psyche. And we feel that as uncomfortable emotion, frozen emotion usually, right? Maybe you feel like A, the doubt I mentioned, B, the restlessness. Maybe you also feel a tension in the jaw, the throat, the chest, the gut. Or maybe when you're going out into daily life and you're engaging with people, you're noticing just like this really vivid sense of tension that feels vague and uncomfortable. And it's hard to know what's even going on, and it creates this like frustration, clinginess, and helplessness, right? So these are all the symptoms. Okay, so ultimately, it's helpful to know that what we're dealing with here is emotional repression, right? Because when we were young, when we were free, when we were babies, we're crying. You watch any baby, watch any animal, in fact, like a dog or a cat or any animal. They have no inhibitions. They're acting very much instinctually. But as we mature as adults, which we do mature, but the the coping strategy that we develop is to recline our mind. Our mind goes into thought to distance itself from reality. If I can think my way out of this problem, I can feel better. And we get so addicted to that all we're doing is feeling at odds with life all of the time until we start on this path of non-resistance, of awakening, of equanimity, right? But what we need to do is we need to come more into the body. So arresting is awareness more. That's bringing up all of our repressed coping strategies that we develop through life. And now we need to basically re-establish the mind-body connection by putting our attention into the body as consistently as we can remember to. And like, I know some of you are quite serious, like spiritual seekers, and I prefer to really work with only the earnest people who want to get to the root and liberate the deepest love in this lifetime by looking at the darkest places of their psyche. I mean, that's how I work, that's how I operate. And I like to pull people in who are like that because it, like, yeah, you're awesome and I would want to know you in person. But basically, we need to retrain the mind to go into the body more, and that includes feeling the unpleasant sensations. And oh God, will they potentially be unpleasant? You know, like I remember being in the workplace when I was transitioning into this work, the embodiment work, and this like encountering people where I would feel so uncomfortable around them. And my sensitivity was also opening up because of the resting as awareness and the spiritual practice. Be so uncomfortable around them that I would feel these like blanketing sensations of like shame and dread or something like all at once, and having to be with that like the whole day, right? I'm not saying, I think there's much better approaches now, but the fundamental thing is to address the mind-body split that has occurred through mind identification growing up by putting our attention back into the body. Feeling the sensations. When we get triggered, straight away we're in the body. When we go into a social setting and we're feeling inauthentic, feeling uncomfortable on our own skin, straight away into the body. When we're talking with our parents after not seeing them for a long time, right? You know, the famous Ram Dass quote, if you think you're enlightened, spend a weekend with your family. We're putting our attention into the body. Rather than disconnecting, going up into the head, trying to rest as awareness to get away from it all. It's like, okay, we can do that, and that can be skillful to question our identity. But if we can feel that spaciousness and then simultaneously bring attention into the body in an ongoing way, that's really the foundation of this work, is embodiment and feeling comfortable in your own skin. Because I think what creates that uncomfortable feeling is when we are disembodied and we don't have a loving fullness and saturation of attention in the body. So there's this like uncomfortable sort of semi-dissociated feeling when we're like trying to rest as awareness. And then meanwhile we have this frozen energy in our gut or like our heart or something. And we're not fully in contact with it. We're like slightly in contact with it. We're more or less in contact with it, but we're not like deeply immersed in the sensation, where we're feeling the little subtle eddies, the little subtle tensions, that when we gently incline our attention toward it, like just like we're crawling like a baby toward the sensation that we're neglecting, and we're just welcoming in everything in the totality of our experience very fully, deeply, and richly, that starts to cut away and sever that feeling of being disconnected from the body, which is where a lot of the feeling of being uncomfortable in our skin really comes from, I believe. So, okay, we're doing that. We're coming closer into the sensation. And that, interestingly, seems to create a feeling of being more comfortable in our own skin, even though we're still uncomfortable. Because we're accepting and acknowledging ourselves where we're at. And this can get really tricky because we can have all sorts of like non-dual spiritual doubts of what we think awakening will get for us. Like we're going to be really like happy and blissful all the time and everyone's going to love us. And maybe we've heard all of these like concepts that we've accrued that have just like subtly woven themselves into our psyche. And then we become mysteriously fixated on them, that then amplify that feeling of wanting to become disembodied or amplify the suffering. So for example, like I mentioned at the start, how like we can become like at odds with thought or something, and that creates this feeling of pain, this feeling of like discomfort. And until we can really just begin to learn that really, if there's any sort of thought, no matter how spiritual, no matter how like insightful it sounds, no matter how magically delicate and intelligent it sounds, once we see that it's all just thought and it comes from the body, and you can feel the sort of energetic feeling of where the thought comes from. So there's like, if there's a thought, there's an energy underneath that usually. So no matter what amount of discomfort you're feeling, there's probably more than likely a thought going on. And there's probably a non-conceptual thought, potentially, the more subtle this gets. So it's almost like it doesn't even have overt words to it. Like it's not saying, oh, you're doing this wrong. It's just a feeling of like, you're doing this wrong. But if you inquire into that sensation, you might uncover that thought. The more you probe into it and you mine that sensation out. It gets really subtle with this sort of stuff. But the bottom line is, put very simply, let's simplify that down. Just your willingness to feel sensation in an ongoing way will significantly reduce that feeling of being uncomfortable in your own skin. And your capacity that will continue to grow the more you rest as awareness. And the more that you combine the two of being spacious with your attention while also feeling, that will essentially enable you to feel much more comfortable, because you're willing to feel everything and anything, and you're meeting yourself exactly where you're at. And that includes all of your spiritual concepts, everything that you've accrued until this moment is just, if you distill it down into feeling sensation in the body, it simplifies a lot of this work and will really cultivate your capacity and acceptance of who you are. There are more subtle attunements, but I'll keep it relatively simple for this video. But I want to add some other things that have been key for me as well, that really amplify a feeling of well-being and being confident and authentic and comfortable in your own skin. So the embodiment piece is key, right? But it doesn't change the fact that we still have discomfort in the body. We have trauma. We have unintegrated, repressed emotions. We need to have more of an active approach at this stage as well. I think we need to be doing the emotion work and the shadow work. So there are really skillful ways, many modalities now to go about this, whether it's a physical modality like TRE, Qigong, breath work. These sorts of modalities are great for helping soften these emotions as we feel them. My approach takes a tantric approach where we essentially do somatic-based shadow work, where we step into our idealized state of being, feeling that in the body, and then liberating anything that is in the way of that through deep emotional repression work. and then enacting that out in daily life. So that's one way. But yeah, there are other modalities like KI, Kiloby inquiries, focusing, internal family systems. All of these things are wonderful modalities. So doing the emotion work is also critical so that we can begin to feel better, so that we're not just contracted down in all these sense of small protective energies that we've accrued as coping strategies that feel really excruciatingly uncomfortable, right? We want to feel better. We actually want to liberate our heart more, be more unbound, and step into the world to live and balance the paradox. We're doing purposeful work of having healthy, wholesome relationships with people, of being able to speak confidently with a full spectrum of emotion with people, and engage in things that we want to do in our life, like, you know, live our purpose out, or what feels like a purpose, while still balancing the emptiness of all of that by holding it all in the complete, ineffable unknowingness of presence. But we still have to acknowledge that there is pain in the body. There's real, authentic pain that we've accrued, and we can release that in very effective ways. It's not just to say that there's no one to do anything, right? When we get fixated there's no one to do anything, right? Who's there to do any healing work? Why should you even do healing work? Step away from all of that, right? So I don't believe that to be true. I believe I don't believe anything. It's nice, it's good to not hold any view too rigidly, but in the same sense, I can hold it lightly enough that I think that we do need to do this work to feel better, to liberate our shadows from a place of spacious knowingness of our true identity, while also being embodied, feeling our sensations fully. The next thing is also trusting ourselves, right? So when we don't trust ourselves, when we don't trust God, when we don't trust awareness, when we don't trust our instincts at the fundamental level, and we're constantly like doing things like this, here's the symptoms of not trusting yourself. Constantly watching spiritual videos, putting and projecting a teacher to be the authority of your life, to tell you what to do and how to practice and how to live your life. That's one way we could do it. Another way could be that we subconsciously put a lot of responsibility on our partners, our spouses, or something like that, where we don't feel confident and empowered within our own beingness to get our needs met, to know where we want to go in our life, to know what we need. So we attach ourselves to other people unskillfully and sever our sovereignty, our individual sovereignty. Or we just simply are constantly in a state of doubt where we're second guessing everything and we're too scared because there's just so much emotional repression going on. Right? So the more that we unravel through the connecting to the spaciousness of our being, to being embodied in our nervous system by feeling sensations, and by unraveling and releasing these dense, emotionally repressed areas in our psyche through skillful inquiry, then we start to trust ourselves more. So it's like an upward spiral. We keep ascending the more that we keep going on this work. Well, this has been my experience at least, and it seems like I would imagine it's a pretty similar thing for others as well, right? It's not linear. I'm not saying it's just like whoa, but it's, you know, something like this where we might trust ourselves, we might feel more embodied, then we're second guessing, and then we're still moving upward. But nonetheless, we're beginning to trust ourselves more. We're beginning to trust ourselves, trust God, trust our instinct. And so a combination of all of these things starts to feel that we start to feel much more comfortable in our own skin because we trust ourselves, we're releasing patterns of smallness, and we're also deepening very much so into the mystery of being. Like holding this empty fullness in experience. It's so beautiful, right? Now, the bulk of the work, I think, comes in the emotional work because that's where like we'll spend a lot of time. We'll have, you know, like fixated emotional places that feel like we can't trust ourselves. So how do we get into those areas and meaningfully do it? And I hope this gives you some context, and I hope it really helps you understand on what you could be doing moving forward. And broadens your view. So if you need more help with this, check the top link in the description. I'm releasing an ebook which is going to go over how I work with people so you can get deeper in this work and know how to really move forward even more effectively. And book a clarity call if you want to work with me one-on-one, if you need more support. Go deep into emotional repression specifically, and liberating more beingness and love into your life, more authenticity, better relationships, better work. Just, yeah, let's get into it. But much love to you, and I'll see you in the next video. Hope you found this helpful.